Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. In this episode, Rashaad Ernesto Green takes us behind the scenes of his new drama, Premature. Set in a hot summer in Harlem, Green's film tells the story of 17-year-old poet Ayanna, who is drawn into a relationship with Isaiah, a young music producer who moves into the city just as Ayanna is about to leave for college. In addition to Premature, Mr. Green's directorial credits include the feature film Gun Hill Road, an episode of the miniseries Looking for Alaska, and episodes of the series Grimm, Supernatural, The Vampire Diaries, Being Mary Jane, The Quad, Vita, Luke Cage, Proven Innocent, and The Shy. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Green spoke with director Dawn Wilkinson about filming Premature. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Hey, y'all.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. And thank you for such a beautiful film, Rashaad. It was really beautiful. I'm just curious what inspired you to approach this subject matter and this story.
So, thank you so much. The film started as a short film in 2008 that I wrote and directed when I was at NYU Graduate Film School, about a young woman, she's 14 years old, who gets pregnant in the Bronx and how she has to deal with that pregnancy within her family and community. And I cast Zora Howard as the lead in that film. And she was 14 years old at the time and turned in a brilliant performance, and that film went on to HBO and did what it did. And over the last few years, we've been talking about collaborating again. And this time we decided to write something together. And we got into the room in the final part of 2016 when she had a break from school, about a month winter recess, and asked ourselves what we felt was missing in current day Black cinema, and felt like there was an overabundance of films that dealt with Black victimization, Black fear, pain, suffering, and death. And we felt like we wanted to do something different with this film, that we wanted to contribute something to the other side of that equation, to Black life and Black love instead. And so we felt like we could call from our life experiences and our heartbreaks and the loves of our life and how we felt at that time in our life, and make a love story. And we did that. And when we were writing it, themes from the short film began to creep into our process, the settings, characters, world, and we embraced them and just kind of put everything together.
Can you talk a little bit more about how the writing process and how that collaboration worked? Did you outline together? Did you write scenes together? Did you write different parts? How did it happen?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a very organic process. We start off the morning with coffee in Isaiah's apartment, which is my apartment, and we just basically talk about our lives, things that we maybe didn't know about each other and our relationships, and we really dug deep, and kind of just jotted notes down about what I found interesting and what we could explore, and then we just started outlining together, and then said, okay, at the end of this month we wanted a draft, so we kind of.
So you made a deadline.
Exactly.
The all-important deadline.
Exactly, and it wasn't a very good draft at the end of that month, but at least we knew we wanted 100 pages on done by that time. So we're like, okay, we've done enough talking. Now over these next couple of weeks, we have to draft the thing, And so, I'll take this sequence, you take that sequence, you take this, and then we just did it like that. And like I said, draft wasn't the greatest at the end of that month. She went back to school. I went to direct a couple of episodes of television, but we spoke over the phone about, what was missing in the script and where it could go, and we shared some ideas, and then whenever we could, we rolled up our sleeves and got back in and did that over a period of 2 years.
I noticed the real New York City subway, and I just wondered if you had specific locations in mind when you were writing, or if that was something that happened much later when you were in pre-production, and how that, not just the choice of locations, but did you visualize in advance to some extent the look that you were going for when thinking about where the scenes would happen, or was it a low budget approach where you kind of went in places that you had access to?
I would say it was probably both, but definitely when writing, we had an idea of where we wanted to place certain scenes, and then because of location issues or budget constraints, we had to accept alternatives. So because we wrote in my room, essentially, we wrote it to that space, and the streets outside, and the vestibule downstairs, and the staircase, blah blah blah. So we shot the film in my room with those records, which were records my father left to me, and with the park around the corner. That first date was supposed to end up in Coney Island, but because of location issues and the fact that it was going to be like loud music that we couldn't control, we weren't going to be able to like the ocean. We said, okay, you know what? Instead of Coney Island at night, it's now the park around the corner at dusk. And so, and that was like something that was a decision that was made, while we were shooting already, and we had to be flexible and call those kind of audibles on the fly, but it worked itself out. Instead of the ocean, we had the river, and there was a scene after the Mexican restaurant where they had the altercation with the friends. There was a scene that's supposed to be exterior night on the street, and again, we were like up against the clock and we're running out of time. And I was like, well, we're not going to be able to spend an hour lighting the exterior night. So there was a second half of that scene where they were dancing on the subway platform to the conga drummer, and said, okay, well, they're going to have that argument down there as well, because it's lit, and we'll just stick it down there, and and then it worked itself out again, so we had to remain flexible and be able to pick up and run on the fly, and I'm just glad we were able to do that and just kept the story and the characters at the front of our mind, so that whatever decisions we made were informed by character and story.
There's a lot of beautiful shots in the film. I have a couple questions about that, but one of them is, like, for example, when she goes to get the pregnancy test and walks to the counter and then it goes out of focus, so beautiful. And when she's in bed with her friend and they're facing each other, so beautiful. Can you talk about your collaboration with your director of photography? Do you storyboard or take photographs or have visual inspiration?
This is the first time I was working with Laura Valadeo. She's a recent star out of NYU, and I'm very, very happy that I was introduced to her. My regular go-to DPs were all working in television, so they were unavailable. So I reached out to my old NYU professors from grad school, and they gave me a couple of names, but one name that was in common was Laura Valadeo. I looked at her reel and her website and was very impressed by the work that I saw. And so we met together in Harlem, and it was her dream to shoot on 16 millimeter as well. And we just started talking about our influences and movies that we like, and what this could feel like, what she felt the script felt like, and we were speaking the same language. So, I threw a whole bunch of films her way that she hadn't seen, and she shared some films that I hadn't seen, and she really did her homework. She had a beautiful presentation and lookbook. Basically breaking down some of the films that I had showed her, and we had stylistic approach to when Ayanna was with her friends versus when she was with Isaiah, and we didn't storyboard, but we just talked about feel and what color we felt certain scenes were, and what. Maybe what films certain sequences reminded us of or something like that. And we just took it from there. It was pretty organic when we were on set, and, we knew that because we didn't want to burn film, that we needed to be a little bit more economical with the approach to shooting. So, wherever we could, we try to conserve the shots, so any scene that could be played in one, we try to figure out a way to do that, and especially because we were also rushing against the Sundance deadline, we didn't want to give the editor a tremendous amount of options to play with in the editing room, and so we try to reduce the amount of material and shots.
So I think the performances are really grounded and feel very real. And given that you were shooting on film and had such a probably low shooting ratio, how did you approach directing the actors, and was there any rehearsal, or how did you go about getting such great performances?
Well, I wanted a long rehearsal period. I wanted, and then I was like, okay, we're not going to have a long rehearsal period. Maybe we can have just a week. But as we got closer and closer to production, and I decided to greenlight the film, and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to pay actors for rehearsal period. I said, you know what, let's just have at least one day with our two leads, with Isaiah and Ayanna together. But then, and that was the day before production started. But then the morning of that rehearsal day, I was like, oh, today's the Caribbean Day Parade out in Brooklyn.
I wondered about that. I'm like, how did he get that?
And I was like, that would be really nice production value if we went out there, So we basically scrapped the only rehearsal day that we had in order to go out to the Caribbean Day Parade. I made a few phone calls. We got the camera car out there. They loaded the film. We got the costumes, on our actors, and we drove out there and caught the very tail end of the parade. And Josh and Zora didn't know each other very well. We had like one reading before that point, and I just said, to go out there and be in love, and so that was basically their rehearsal, was finding that day as they were running through that parade, they were kissing and hugging and dancing and getting to know each other, like sort of on the fly, and they were both game for it, and we got into the room the next day, and they were able to turn it on. And a lot of those intimate scenes were shot on day 2. I try to make this set as comfortable as I could for them, a closed set, of course, where it was only myself and a script supervisor who had access to the monitor, and only the DP and the boom operator were in the room when those scenes were taking place. And we would fly in the costumer to cover them up as soon as the take was over, or if I had to give direction. They were very comfortable with each other from the start. It was me who was a little bit anxious, and I've known Zora for a very long time, so I kind of had this older brother thing going on for her. And so, seeing her in certain scenes, I was like, oh no, that's like my little sister, but we all got used to it pretty quickly, and and then found our flow.
Something that I think you did really well is the silence and the music, how it plays in the scenes, and how you allow for scenes to not have music as well. Can you talk a little bit about your collaboration with your composer and your approach to music, given that Isaiah is also a music producer, and just your own personal take on how to do that well in a film?
Yeah, I have to give a great shout out to the composers. Patrick Cannell I had not worked with before, and Stephen Swanson is a dear friend of mine. But my editor especially has a great ear for music, and he was very sparse with his temp track and said it should sound like this. And we always knew that piano was something that we were leaning on because of Isaiah's, because he played piano. So we wanted that sort of as the foundation of the score. And Justin's the editor, placed the temp track in places, and it felt very right. So when we were communicating to the composers that we wanted to feel like this and not to stray too far away from this specific feel, and they didn't. They gave us options that were very similar to the temp score that Justin had chosen, and very much worked. And then the poetry was also something that was not written into the film, not written into the script. It was something that we found in the editing process. And when there was one scene that we shot in particular where we were not prepared to hear any poetry. It was a choice, I guess, because Zora's a spoken word artist. She has a background in spoken, and so she was feeling, I think, very self-conscious about having Ayanna be a poet or hearing her poetry in the film. And so in this one particular scene where he discovers her journal and her poetry, and he says, oh wow, you're lyrical. The scene was supposed to end where she begins the poem. This is like, but when we were shooting it, I said, can you just say a few sentences, a few words? And so Zora started to say a poem that she had remembered from a couple of years prior. And she was like, this is not going to make the film, right? I was like, no, it's fine. But can you just finish the poem? And so when I saw the first cut of the film, the first rough cut, Justin had laid that sort of bastardized memory of a poem over the sonogram sequence. And it just worked really well. But it was kind of a unicorn because it was the only place in the film that we heard the poetry other than, what we suppose are her lyrics for the song, John Forbid. So it kind of stood out, and we felt like Ayanna doesn't speak a lot, and we needed a little bit more access to her own internal mindset and like what she was thinking and her interiority. And so we felt like poetry could be a good way to get there. And we asked Zora, hey, this is what's going on in the scene, and can you just give us a couple lines? It has to do with yearning or, seeing something that you desire or love. And, in a day or 2 days, she would send, 4 or 5 verses with a voice recorder over the iPhone, and that's what we used in the film.
Wow, it's really beautiful how the voiceover is. I wondered if you had a philosophy with regard to her choice. If there's any political kind of thoughts that you had around that, because there's a moment where Isaiah says to her, "Are you okay?" And it seemed like that could be, "Are you okay, like with this, like consent?" Or it could be, "Are you okay, like have you taken birth control or something?" Is this was that moment? Was that just my own interpretation of that moment? That's before they have sex the first time. He says, "Are you okay?" Was that
Oh, do you mean like was that referring to whether they should have unprotected sex?
Yeah, like I was just curious if you were trying to make a point about that in any way, because then they have that really interesting conversation later where she says it's her choice and he says he had a right to know. And I just felt like you raised that question in a really human, sort of empathetic way. Were you trying to set it up with that conversation in that first sex scene? Or could you talk about just generally how you chose this sort of, potentially inflammatory kind of conflict between the two of them?
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily trying to land on one side of that debate or another. I just know that they would feel differently about it and would be a great area of conflict. And so to give that to the characters, of course, people are going to think about it, talk about it, and say, who's right and who's wrong. And hopefully they both have very valid points. As far as their first sex scene is concerned, that's not what he was. He wasn't necessarily referring to having unprotected sex with her. It was more that she was coming on very strong, and I think he was trying to slow things down and take it at his own pace because she was very anxious. Mm-hmm. And so I think the "Are you okay?" is like he was like
to slow it down and make sure that it was
down. Yeah. But as far as that scene in the vestibule, I know we're going to have people who feel very differently, that she has very much the right to choose what to do with her body without consulting him, and then we're going to have folks that think that perhaps he should be consulted as well. And like I said, I don't have a stake in it, but I want to make both characters right, so you can make a choice for yourself.
Is that something that you talked about with the cast too, or did you need to have that conversation as part of your direction?
The conversation about that specific choice?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think it's on the page, as far as how he feels about it. And make the point in the scene that, I mean, were you ready to have a baby, or do you think that you actually wanted a child right now? And the answer is probably no. He's probably not ready, and he's probably did not want to have a child. But he does feel robbed and feels violated that he didn't get to have a say in the matter, or that the choice wasn't presented to him.
Right.
So we don't. I think it was on the page enough that and Josh is very, very smart. And Zora's as well. So they were able to feel very strongly about their position. And so we didn't need to have too many theoretical discussion about it, and just that in the performing of it, I just kept on reminding them that they loved each other. That this violation was because to remind them that it shouldn't feel like a complete rejection of her. It's more that he was hurt that she didn't include him in this, and so that what I still wanted to feel during that argument was that they were torn. That there was still some inkling of love that was there.
I love the ending, and I'm curious if you had like the shot where they're sitting and the train's going by, and she's holding her suitcase, and you wonder, like, what's going to happen next, which is like my favorite kind of ending. Did you envision, like, what happens after the credits? Like, what happens? That she goes to school in your mind, or is it just, does it need to be left open?
I mean, we always get in trouble as directors by leaving these open-ended, because then they're like, well, what happens? I'm like, I don't know, actually. I want you to have an opinion about what happens. I want you guys to argue at home about what happens. I hope personally that she doesn't throw her entire life away and just, I hope that she's able to make something of herself. But I don't know in terms of their relationship, what that will be, whether he remains in her life, whether I don't know. I can tell you about that last shot though.
Great. Tell me about that shot.
So we were kicked off of that platform.
Wow.
Yeah, by NYPD. We thought we were permitted, because certain subways and stuff like that, so long as you don't have the camera on sticks, like, you're able to shoot. But, I guess we didn't read the fine print for this particular one. And we were shooting up there for a while. And then the police became aware of us and came up there and said, you're shut down, and we didn't get that last close-up of Josh. So we had to return the next day and just steal it again. But that shot with the train, I hadn't planned on that. I had conceived that the credits would roll with them still waiting on the platform in a wider shot. And you would just, see the credits while they're just sitting there waiting forever, But then in that 2-shot, the train went by. And while I was looking at it, I was like, that looks like the end of a film.
When you see it.
I was like, the film guys just kind of smiled on us, and I was just like, I think I just saw the last shot, And so when we got in the editing room, we looked at the other, the other way, but it just felt right. So
yeah, because you can see their emotions.
Yeah. I mean, they look at each other, the timing was right, and then that train comes and you can still see them through the train. I was like, oh, it looks great. So, yeah.
So can you tell us, because I think we're getting towards the end, what maybe your high point was in production, and your highest point and your lowest point in the process of making this film from the development right through to, finishing the mix?
It was quite the journey. I had spent a number of years in television, directing episodes for 5 or 6 years before making this second feature. So, when we got down to the wire and I decided to take a plunge and invest the money that I had made in television into the second feature, I didn't necessarily understand like the stress that would come as a result of that decision.
Of producing.
I did have help from a friend, Susan Kalechi Watson, and then an organization, Cinereach, and Kodak was very generous and gave us a wonderful discount as well. But I invested a large portion of my own savings into the film, and so if I saw something wasn't being done right, or the budget was rising, it always made me sweat. So, it was hard to just keep a director hat on when, I knew things were going on behind the camera. So as far as low points, I mean, I was sweating a lot of that production. It's not just because it was hot outside. But there were high points because, I mean, I love what I do. I love getting performances out of actors that they didn't even know were there, and seeing real life on screen. Like, that's what I live to do. So we had a lot of those moments where I just got to enjoy watching the performances gel and the actors feed off of each other and create that authenticity on screen. I love that.
Thank you, Rashaad. You did an amazing job. It's a wonderful film.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.